Hello, this is Pam Electric Ghost. Is this Luna?
Hi, this is Luna. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I just wanted to give a brief little intro. Pam Electric Ghost, we interview indie artists from all around the world. We've been doing it since 2018, and now we have Luna on the line. And so you're from Los Angeles, right? That's where you are
I'm,
right now?
yes, I'm in LA right now.
So you're a pop singer-songwriter, and based on your bio, you're heavily influenced by 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, like retro pop.
Yeah, retro part of my sound. I also do dark pop. One thing that people will get to know about me as I continue to release music is that I have very split personalities. On one end, I am a party pop songwriter, but on the other end, I'm also a very emo, raw, emotional songwriter as well. So my music is very based on duality, dark and light, and that's the whole message behind who I am as an artist and my brand as well.
Yeah, because you're mixing multiple genres. You have like hip hop, indie rock, electronic. You got that dark pop. But then if you look at the list of your influences, you had Lana Del Rey, Madonna, Stevie Nicks, Lady Gaga, Gwen Stefani, Selena, Rihanna, Cher, and Amy Winehouse. So that's very that's a good set of influences. It gives
Oh
you a
yeah.
lot of different directions you can go with that.
Oh, definitely. And I grew up listening to all sorts of music, and that's up to this point has been, I would say, a blessing and a curse. It's been a little hard to hone in my sound because I am so influenced by
Mm-hmm.
artists and genres, from I grew up listening to Depeche Mode and The Cure.
Oh,
Uh, and
you're
then I went, oh yeah, super, super dark,
well, I'm a
super
keyboardist, so
dark.
like I'm a new romantic, new wave keyboardist, you know. So like when you bring up Depeche Mode, New Order, or like Joy Division, those are bands that I like. Yeah, you know.
Oh yeah, New Order,
Yeah,
and Duran, A Flock of Seagulls. I love all that.
yeah.
I grew up listening to that style of music with my dad, and then I had my mom who was more into Madonna and Cher and Cyndi Lauper. So I got both ends of the spectrum when it comes to making songwriting
I think that's
specifically.
very good because I think it's good to be cross genre because then you can create new material. You can you can take all those influences and then you create something new.
Oh yeah, I'm totally in the business of bringing back the 80s sound and making it modern and incorporating the 80s sound with some contemporary hip hop elements. And I also listen to Rihanna, so a little bit more of the hip hop side I got into as I got a little older.
Mm-hmm.
So I really would love to create a new interpretation of old music.
Yeah, because I go even older because you know I come from a period of I grew up in the '70s listening to vinyl and eight tracks, and you know bands like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer are like my original influences. You know, like guys like Parliament Funkadelic, Sun Ra,
Mm.
you know Miles Davis. So those are the kind of bands that I really keyed in on as an artist. So that kind of gives you like a wide berth to
That's good though.
yeah.
It's good.
Well, yeah, I'm a big proponent of like analog and hardware synths, which are coming back because bands like New Order and The Cure and Depeche Mode, they used Moogs, they used Prophets, they used Jupiter 8s. So those things actually, those devices, those hardware synths create that sound. And even if you get the plugins, the real synths, which I've come back and all the companies are back into doing polyphonic analog and modular, which I think is really cool because if you're into that period, those iconic synths, CS80s, Prophet 5s, Jupiter 8s, mini modes, I mean, that's what made that sound.
Oh yeah, and I personally, I am just a singer. I'm not gonna sit there and say that I am the most tech savvy person when it comes to being behind the boards as a producer or an engineer. But I do hang around a lot of producers. I am affiliated with a collective called Producer Social, and a lot of those guys are producers and very much into the analog sound. And I'm fortunate enough to work with a company called Strange Electronic, and they're really pushing the Euro rack movement and the
Yeah.
modular
Yeah.
sound and incorporating light and all that. And so, though I personally don't know how to work it, I have a strong appreciation for it because I love the sound, and I just happen to have homies who are, invested in that movement. It's really fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, I
Where
think
music
it's
is
really
moving
good
towards.
for young people to understand that electronic music is, I understand hip hop artists and EDM artists, they live in their soft sense and their Pro Tools, but the heart of electronic music came from those original analog instruments. And I think a lot of people in Europe and all over the world are starting to realize that if you go back to those machines, you can really create really unique music. But yeah, it looks like you've been working toward your EP, which is coming out this winter, which is called "This Must Be Love," right?
Yes, this must be love is my baby. It is a child that I have been trying to raise for a very long time. And I'm very excited to announce that it will be out in late November. I haven't set an official launch date yet, as my team and I are, we're still figuring out some things on the marketing end, but it will be out in late November, either right before or right after Thanksgiving. And it's a 5-song EP. All the songs were produced by a really talented LA-based producer who goes by the name Dead Friend. And yeah, it's very much as a life story. It's based on real life experiences, and it's a journey. It's intended to be listened to from track 1 to track 5 in sequence. And I really hope that everyone who listens to it gets the message.
So it's like a full, like you actually, like one of the things I talked to artists, I had an interview last night, and we were talking about like when you do an album, the reason you should do an album or EP is because it should have like a theme. And so it sounds like that you're doing that, and it kind of goes back to the original kind of album oriented musicians like the Beatles. Sergeant Pepper's created the whole change back in the '60s from just doing singles to actually having themed albums. Even though Sergeant Pepper doesn't have a theme that you can immediately, key in on, like Pink Floyd, The Wall or something. The theme is basically psychedelic, and all the songs kind of flow together. And so it seems like artists that go on the direction of doing an album, they kind of owe it to the Beatles to go back to that time, that's where this that whole format comes from. So it's interesting because it's like reading a novel, like a sonic novel. That's the way I look at it when somebody does an album that has a theme. But
Oh yeah, and I'm very influenced. I mean, as we talked about, I'm very influenced by music of the past. I'm a student of all different eras of music, but specifically, the time of the Beatles, and from then on, where music started to have a little bit more of an impact in popular culture. And I strongly believe that it's important to have a message. And one of the things that I wanted to do with this project was I wanted to break out into the music industry with a clear message on who I am, where I come from, what I stand for, and what I hope my music is able to offer fans and listeners all over the world. So yeah, This Must Be Love is very much a mini album, or based on a concept of discovering what love is in various phases. And in this particular album, my dad passed away this year in February, and that was my first experience ever losing somebody, um, in a way where they would never come back. And I also have, obviously, a relationship with my dad where your parents are among the first people that you experience love from and learn what love is through. And so this album, or this EP rather, is very much based on the 5 stages of grief. And you'll kind of see that as you listen to each song. It goes from the first stage, where you're isolating yourself and coming to terms with the fact that something tragic happened, and then you move towards anger, and then there's the bartering, and then there's the depression, but the acceptance. And at the end, by the end of This Must Be Love, you realize that love can be whatever you want, and it is always different from person to person, and your relationship with somebody and the way you love them may be different. Your love is not always the same, and that's kind of what I learned, and that's a big part of the message that I want to share, is that there's no one definition of love. It's different for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah, that it's really cool to see an artist in this age of this people doing playlists and singles that are kind of unrelated to actually have a theme like that, and it's deep. That you're taking like the classic singer songwriter motif, like Carole King, Bob Dylan, Neil Diamond. They would put a lot of their soul and their own story into their music, and that sounds like what you're doing. That's always a good route. I think that's really cool for your debut to go that way.
Thank you.
And the question I also had was, your dead friend producer produced your Boyfriend for the Night. Is that part of this project, or is that just a separate single?
Yeah, he did produce that, and it was the first record that we collaborated on together. It was kind of our introduction to what each other's all about. So I was in the process of rebranding, and I think he was kind of a little bit in the same scope as I was, where he was producing for another artist for the first time. So we really wanted this first song to be something fun. It is not necessarily related to the EP in any way, other than the theme of my music. The theme of Boyfriend for the Night, that's the more flirty retro pop side of me.
Yeah.
Whereas This Must Be Love is a little deeper, but
yeah, it didn't seem like it would fit into what you just said, so it seemed like it was maybe a separate project.
Yeah, it's definitely a separate project, but when you see the big picture of all the music that I'm about to put out, you'll see how, okay, yeah, Boyfriend for the Night was definitely the precursor to everything else that she's
Or a
releasing.
precursor to that. You're working with the same in-person producer, right? Dead Friend is the producer, so you get a preview of at least that style, even though you might, it sounds like it's different for what you're doing. It's like a deeper, heavier kind of vibe going on. But yeah, it's really interesting. So I saw that you also played the Whisky A Go Go, and being a big purveyor of classic music, that's a big venue. I mean, that's a historic venue that a lot of people that know music history know what it means, like CBGBs or in like any of the great music theaters. So how was that when you did that?
Wow. Well, I mean, honestly, it was a dream come true to be able to put that as the first venue that I ever performed at.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, that was my debut as a solo artist, coming out singing all my own solo songs with my new sound and my new team. So it was, one, a dream come true. Two, I was just beside myself. I could not believe that opportunity even presented itself to me in the first place, especially since as soon as you walk through those doors, you just feel the history in the room. Like, you feel the ghosts of rockers past just like there.
All the great, there are tons of great artists played there. And it's like, CBGB's in New York, and like I'm close to, I mean, I live in New England, so CBGB's is like where all the indie rockers, all the indie bands want to play CBGB's, because that's just like that's it. But there's a lot of other places in New York that are at the same level. But yeah, I can understand that, because that's the kind of that's the kind of impact that place has. So I think it's really interesting.
Yeah,
and it's really cool that you got there. I mean, it's awesome.
I'm very fortunate enough to be able to return. I just found out last night that I will be playing the Whisky A Go Go again on November 13th.
Great. We can push that. We can push that on our podcast. We'll just put a little note that you're doing that.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I would love for everybody to know that I'll be there again, performing at 9.
What date is that?
November 13th. I believe it's a Wednesday.
Cool. I'll just write that down. Yeah, because we can actually put your hyperlinks embedded into the podcast. So, like, one of the cool things about Anchor, we're actually part of Spotify. So we actually put out our podcast on Spotify and 11 other platforms, including Apple and Radio Public and all these other ones. And so this podcast gets produced. It's not live right now, but as soon as we finish, it goes and migrates to all those podcast sites.
Oh, very cool.
And then we can put hyperlinks, and then we have full integration with Instagram, and Spotify, in that the highlight can point to this episode on Spotify. And so when we put the highlight onto our Instagram, the Phantom Electric Ghost Expansive Sound Experiments Instagram, people can click on the highlight for this episode and it'll go right to the podcast on Spotify.
Oh, very
And
cool.
you can do the same thing if you have a Spotify account and you go into the podcast for this episode, you can create a highlight that will link it.
Nice. So I'll definitely make sure to put this on my Spotify account, on my artist profile.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that we can do this. But yeah, we've been doing over the time. We have a bunch of questions. I know you're kind of pressed for time, because we usually stretch out where we talk to people for like an hour. But when did you first get into music? Like what age?
Well, I took guitar lessons when I was about 13 years old, around the 8th grade, and it didn't really go too far. I had to make a decision whether I wanted to be an athlete or a musician, and at the time, being an athlete seemed to have a more promising future for me. But lo and behold, after getting a softball scholarship and going to college to do the whole thing, I ended up getting hurt. And while I was in college, I couldn't play anymore. So I ended up taking that opportunity to take some electives and switched my major to creative writing. And, I took a couple songwriting classes. I took a intro to digital production class and my first set of vocal lessons. And from then on, I was like, yep, this is what I need to do. So I was in college when I first started getting myself into music, but my career itself didn't actually begin until 2016. I started off in a house music duo with my best friend who goes by DJ Firefly, and we were doing the live set thing for about a year. And then from then on, I realized that I had a talent for songwriting and performing, and it's what I wanted to do full time for the rest of my life. And so in 2017, I was like, all right, I'm doing it. I'm going to do the solo thing. And from then until now, I've just really been working on honing my craft, writing songs, collaborating with people, getting as much exposure as possible, and really just been working towards where I'm at right now. So this end of the year is kind of the culmination. It's the fruit of all my labor up to this point. And, I'm really excited and very fortunate and grateful.
So when you write a song, do you write, like, do you have a home studio? Do you use like a DAW? Do you just use an acoustic guitar? I mean, how do you, as a singer-songwriter, how do you approach creating a song? Do you just write as a vocalist? Do you focus on the melodies and the vocals and the hooks? Or do you actually work on like a demo and then let a producer kind of work it out from there?
Honestly, each situation is a little different. I do have my own little studio at home, for the sole purpose of practicing and writing and just brainstorming ideas. Sometimes I might have an idea for a song and I'll work it out. I'll work the melody out on my keyboard and come up with an idea. And I'll bring it to the studio to Dead Friend and I'll say like, hey, this is what I have. What do you think? Or sometimes, if I'm really feeling something, I'll record a quick demo and I'll send it over to him, and, he'll take the project from there and just kind of do what he does with it. But he and I have a very strong working relationship where a lot of our creation happens in the studio. We work out of Garnish Recording Studio in Hollywood, and a lot of our writing process is just meeting up, talking about what we want to write about, and he'll work on the production, I'll work on the songwriting. Sometimes we'll work on the songwriting together. Sometimes, I'm directing what sound I want or what instruments I want. It changes all the time for us, but
That's interesting. So do you find that you actually have a better like working session when you actually are physically in the same space, or do you find that it doesn't really matter to you? You can work kind of remote. Do you physically have to be in the studio to really get something done, or can you work something out kind of without being in the studio?
I've definitely worked things out by myself at home without being in the studio, but there is just, for me personally, there is just some type of magic when you can be face to face with the person you're creating with and really vibe off of each other and just solve problems in the moment, or, you know, talk about things in the moment. You don't have to wait, or you don't have to guess. Is he going to like this, or is she going to like this? You know, when you're there in person, you can see if somebody is feeling something, you know. It's just like a band jam session. You can
it's like
feel when the guitar player is playing something, and as a drummer, you just want to go with it. And there's just something so special about that feeling. So I personally do enjoy being in the studio to create. But like I said, it just kind of depends on the nature of the song and the idea.
Yeah, because the modern technology, you can do a lot. I mean, I've actually collaborated with artists like in California, and I live in New Hampshire. I've collaborated with artists in Sweden, and I live, you know, they're in Sweden. So yeah, because of the technology, you know, you can get a track, and then you can, you know, have a conference call, and you can go back and forth even virtually and still get stuff done. But I come from the days back in the 70s where I was in a, you know, garage or a basement with a full rock band, and we were writing by just rolling like a track, you know, a Tascam 4-tracker, and then we go back through 2 hours worth of tape looking for the hooks, and we found that kind of recording was very honest. It's kind of like the punk aesthetic. You know, if you like bands like the Clash or the Sex Pistols, stuff like that, that's kind of where you get that kind of raw power, is that you play, and then you figure out stuff by practicing and by being together. So yeah, I can understand both ways.
Oh yeah,
Multiple
now that I
ways
think about it, I'm very old school. I'm learning this right now. I'm very old school.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people that do the collab. You talk to, I mean, I've talked to like DJs like DJ Lana and, you know, all these like EDM DJs, and they can work things out, you know, globally. They'll get somebody, you know, we working with somebody in South Africa. They'll be working with somebody in London, and like they never even met. But you know, this is the way the world is now. But I do personally love working with a real drummer or a guitar player. And so, yeah, having a studio session where you're actually with, you know, that somebody who's on the bass or on the drums is nothing like that. I think you always end up creating something different than what you anticipated.
Oh yeah.
Your
And
demo
it's
can
amazing.
become something else, you know.
And it's amazing how other people.
Oh, I lost you there for a second. I think the signal dropped out a little bit.
Hello, I'm still here.
Yeah, your signal dropped for a second. I don't know if you're in a dead space or something.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, just repeat what you were just saying.
Oh, I was just saying how it's just amazing how somebody else and their influence can take your idea and make it so much bigger than you ever imagined that idea to be in the first place. And you know, there's sometimes they offer advice, or they offer an energy, and it inspires you to turn what you originally had into something so much bigger. And
Yeah.
you know, like I said, there's just a magic in that. And I personally, I love that. That's my favorite thing about creating music. It's how it translates to people.
Yeah, I always thought it was very interesting, you know, because as a, you know, producer myself, I have all these I have like 808s and, you know, classic drum machines. But, you know, I'll take a drum pattern I created, and if I give it to a real drummer, they'll like do something that, you know, they heard what I did, and then because they're a professional drummer, they bring something to the table that I couldn't even have like imagined, and they'll like rework it. And sometimes that what your demo becomes after you bring it to, like, you did your bass line, but a bass player plays your bass line, and then they put their feeling into it, and so it becomes a totally, you know, different thing. Their interpretation of another artist, you know, kind of moves the piece forward. And that's always been I always love that when I can do that. And it's not all me.
Oh yeah, no, me too. It's fun. At the end of the day, it's just fun, really.
Yeah,
You know?
I think, yeah, it's just interesting what you can do today, you know, when you're collaborating with people. Is just there's nothing like having a true collaboration. So I totally appreciate when you're working with a producer. And I've talked to bands, you know, where, you know, everybody in the band is contributing to a project. And it's kind of like, that's really old school. You know, yeah. I've talked to like punk rockers and, you know, indie rockers that still play like, you know, their heroes are like Radiohead and Wilco and U2, and they still record kind of like the old fashioned way of just jamming out and then figure out what they do with it. Yeah, it's just interesting where you can go with music today. So I think it's what's really cool is I've actually talked to more female singer-songwriters on this program, and the 30 artists I've interviewed, probably 80% of the artists I've talked to are women artists.
Wow.
And it seems like that's really in the indie space. That's where a lot of cool stuff is happening. So yeah, I mean, I've talked to some traditional kind of rock bands, like male-centered rock bands, but they're not. They're kind of few and far between. It seems that there's a new trend compared to when I was growing up in the 70s. Like all the bands were all male-centered bands. So it's interesting. I think it's kind of cool. They have different points of view coming through.
Oh yeah, and honestly, that's what excites me the most about the future of music is that right now is the best time to be an independent artist. There have never been more resources available to us to be able to go out and create our own sounds, our own images, our own brands, and to really be the CEOs of our music. And especially for women, we have so much power right now. We don't need a label. A lot of us, I've heard horror stories about the music industry where, females go in expecting to be a certain type of artist, and then, they sign a contract or they get a deal, and all of a sudden they are transformed into somebody that they're not. And we don't really have to deal with that anymore if we don't want to. We have the power to speak for ourselves. We have the power to do a lot of things that women in music, say 30 years ago, couldn't do. Or the opportunities are there for us right now, and it's really exciting for me as a woman and a female artist. But also just it's a beautiful thing to see the social elements of music also starting to change.
Yeah, I've talked to like several artists that have kind of gone through that. I talked to a band, a group, a French duo, two sisters called the Soap Girls, and they were on the label when they were like in their 17, 18 years old. And the label tried to turn them into what they thought they should be. And then they rebelled and they broke out of the contract, and now they're fully indie and they're touring the whole world.
Wow.
And they totally remade their image and did what they wanted. And then I talked to Sarah Gibson, and she had the same thing. She was brought into Nashville. They had this whole thing. They wanted to turn her into a whole, like a Taylor Swift. And then she didn't want to do that. And then she broke out of it. And then she's doing dark pop. So yeah, it's like there's a lot of stories. The 30 people I've talked to, like they're all kind of going that direction where, I was looking at labels, or I did a label and then I didn't like what they were doing and I went indie. And that's why we like to talk to indie artists all over the world on this program, to give the indie artists a platform to show what they're doing and to get their music out there without making them pay for it. And,
Thank you.
Yeah, and just because we're artists ourselves, we've got a distribution deal with a label, but we have a distribution deal, so they put out whatever we create. And so we're able to do what we want. They don't kind of tell us what to do. But yeah, and then I found this podcast, and there's another way to push my material and then push other people's material and kind of push it forward. But we were really happy to have you on the program. When your album comes out, we have had people on the broadcast 3-4 times, and we've had people come and do album release episodes where they talk about each track. So if you're interested in doing that for your new album, when it hits, we could do that when it fits your schedule.
Oh yes, I would love to be back on. I will send you all the information on the release, including dates and stuff, so that we can coordinate something. That would be amazing. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so we can do an episode that This Must Be Love EP, and we'll do it, and we'll push that out. We're gonna push out that you have a show at the Whisky A Go Go on November 13th. Everybody should go see you. Everybody go see Luna, and when her album comes out, make sure you download it and buy the merch. If you're selling T-shirts, buy whatever you have. We're always telling people that you have to support the artist you love. So make sure you support them in every way possible. Because sometimes people think music's free and it's not exactly free.
No, it's not. Especially for us
Um,
artists, nothing's free.
yeah, starving artists, we kind of need to pay for the microphone.
Yeah, we need to pay for everything.
Yeah. All right. So thank you. I'm trying to cut you short because you said you only had so much time. But yeah, we're gonna publish this. We'll send the links out, and I'm very appreciative that you came on the program. And hope everybody listens to Luna. Go on all the streaming services. We're gonna put the links on. So have a great night.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me, and to everyone listening, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you again.
Great.